All right, y'all, welcome to the experiment. Um, Gif and I have known each other for quite some time, and we have a habit of getting into super friendly yet heated and elaborate debates over things. And we thought, why not invite other people in and just record this thing? Let me introduce myself real quick. I'm Tommi Forsström. I am a product leader, executive, a B2B SaaS specialist focusing on a very specific part of companies' journeys that I call the adolescent stage, kind of that weird transition from like, uh-oh, we have product market fit. What now? To how to scale that, ramp that up all the way to creating a portfolio and a complex enterprise. I love that weird transition that happens in that early pivotal stage. What about you, Gif? What's cooking?
Yeah, I've been I've been in this whole innovation tech space for 30 years and began on the business side. I've started a few companies. I've ran product and engineering teams for larger ones. I've helped really big companies try to do innovation. There's a sort of a through line with my career of fascination over how do we invent new things? How do we know that we're doing the right things? Um, and how do you either create growth or get out of situations where growth stagnates? Whether that's through new product or through reinventing business models, all that stuff is really fascinating to me, and has a pretty good overlap with the world that you're interested in, Tommy.
There we go. So let me tee us up with today's topic. So the backdrop here is I recently wrapped up the tour of duty and for the first time in a long time have some time to think and write. And I ended up starting a super duper secret newsletter for the very select few. And I've been sparring on things with GIF and getting his feedback. And we immediately got into yet another one of our fun exchanges of ideas. And I was like, why don't we just like have this over Zoom recorded, put it out there? And so I was thinking we'd start from the topic that I had this week, which is premature expansion, or how more is generally a bad strategic posture for
Yeah.
an early growth stage company. And let's start there. Let's see where we go. Knowing us, we'll stay on topic for a good 60 seconds, but it's good to start somewhere. Is that cool?
Yeah. So, all right, you've got a point of view on your growth stage company, and when is it too late? When is it too early to start expanding?
Well, I love that you asked that question because that is the exact question, which normally a lot of early stage companies, and I've been with quite a few, I know you have, when is probably the hardest and most important strategic question. Companies generally focus on the what, like, what are we going to do?
Yeah.
And then it's just like, okay, do it all right now versus like, let's plot it out onto a timeline. But for me, I learned this apparently Texan saying a while ago that is, don't let your alligator mouth overwhelm your hummingbird ass.
Hold on,
So,
I gotta stop you there. What is an alligator mouth, and what is a hummingbird
hey,
ass?
I am not going to be accountable for Texans, but I'm going to try and parse it out. Basically, it's if you have more of an appetite than your digestion can handle. And I don't want to get too graphic with the
Yep,
analogies
yep.
here,
Your eye's
but
bigger than
point
your
is
stomach. Yep.
exactly, yeah, that's probably the more civil way to say it. But point is, um, when you get to a certain scale, your visibility into your digestion starts. When you're like 10 people in a room, early stage
Yeah.
startup, you know exactly how much it costs to like live with all your decisions, and you can
Yeah.
ramp things down in a heartbeat. Like, oh my God, that go to market motion didn't work. Like, kill it. But when you're like 50, 100, 200 people, when you're like, open Europe or build a new product, might have multi-year ramifications. And that's kind of your hummingbird ass not dealing with your alligator mouth's input. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? Does that
Okay.
ring true?
I'm still totally confused, but let's just go with it.
Animals are complex, but alligators, huge mouth, hummingbirds, I'm assuming relatively tiny rear ends.
Ah, okay, I follow now. Got it. Yep, got it. All
Yeah.
right, so don't bite off more than you could chew. And would you say that this is a problem that a lot of companies fall into?
It's fairly endemic. I mean, in
Yeah.
my time consulting the inside portfolio, most of the time going in was like, y'all are doing a lot and
Yeah.
you're doing a lot of stuff that's working really well and you're
Yeah.
doing a lot of stuff that's working kind of sort of okay,
Yeah.
which is the biggest trap, right? Like, it's great when a thing you try is an absolute failure because it's like easy to walk away. But unfortunately, the vast majority of things that companies do are like, I don't know, kind of good, I guess. Let's keep chugging away.
Is this because everyone's chasing the god of growth? Like what's behind this?
It is that. And it's also, I've found that is a lack of appreciation, if you will, on the growth upside of things. To me, there's a little bit of founder mentality as well, which
Yeah.
is, let's face it, a lot of founders are very infatuated with the hunt of the new. You know, I can't remember. Do you remember whose analogy the whole like settlers or explorers, settlers, townfolk was? Kind
I
of
don't
like
remember who did that, but I know what you mean. Yep. Yep.
and it's like a lot of the DNA of a company early on is very like explorer
Yeah.
focused. I think that's a big part of it is when in doubt, explore.
Yep.
So yeah, I have found that to be a common problem. And, especially as I'm like meeting with founders, they're always super proud to show me like, well, we already built these 3 products and I've got these 4 ideas waiting in the wings. I'm like, how many people were you again?
Yeah.
Well, we're like 40. It's like, oh my God.
Where have you run into this personally?
I want to say, so the story that I shared in my newsletter was when I joined Workstep
Yeah.
a couple of years ago. It was a 2 product company. And I mean, I'm a, bet on the founders, like bet on the jockey, not the horse type of guy. So I was a little, my eyebrow raised a little bit like, okay, you guys
This
are
was a
like
B2B SaaS company, right?
B2B SaaS company. Yeah, straight up. And had built the house on kind of a talent acquisition tool.
Yeah.
Um, but had stumbled upon a kind of voice of employee, like really like workforce sentiment tracking solution,
Yeah.
but was running effectively 2 products with I want to say 70-person org at that point. And the peanut buttering was real. Like the
Yeah.
company's biggest growth challenge was just hedging its bets, too many directions. And as a result, not really getting the returns it deserved on all fronts. And I'm sure you've seen this before. It also creates a lot of weird secondary issues, like issues with alignment between departments,
Yep.
because departments might be running in slightly different directions, which might both be correct.
I certainly have seen that. And I've seen, so I joined a company that was a Series C company and had gotten themselves to about 15 million in revenue. And like, the founding team, the founder, the board, it's all like, okay, it's all straight up and to the right. That's where we're going. And but they had, everyone thinks they've got product market fit where they don't fully have it. Or it's also so easy to lose it within particular submarkets as well. It's like it's not a binary thing as we talk about a lot. And
Yep.
so I think they convince themselves, and oftentimes you have to do this even as part of the fundraising game, right? That you convince yourself that you're further along than you actually are. Um, but not everything in their core market was fully developed. But then they'd spotted an opportunity to make even more money, and it was really high margin money by adding another sort of business line off of the same customers. So it's like the synergies are all here. We're just going to offer this little extra thing. It's the same people. They'll just pay us a little more. Isn't this great? And what they hadn't spotted was that they were creating conflicts within incentive conflicts between the different sides of their customer base and between them and their customers and actually between their 2 products as well. We ended up killing that new product. It wasn't the 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 dissonance it was creating in incentive systems wasn't worth the profitability it was bringing in. And it was so clear that it was creating some growth, but it was about to start killing growth.
That's a really interesting, because again, with like a portfolio, the dynamics between the portfolio can
Yeah.
be incredibly important versus like looking at them as 2 different, revenue lines or 2 different P&Ls. We had a very similar situation with Teachable where
Yeah.
um, the whole company is basically predicated on being kind of an unbiased platform for knowledge creators. Think Shopify, if you will, where it's kind of imperative that the platform doesn't get in the way of the business customer relationship, like the end customer of the customer of Teachable. But then Teachable very cleverly, because every single customer's like real desire was to get more revenue, right? Teachable wanted to get into kind of similar to like Shopify Shop, where it was like a display window, almost like it was called Teachable Discover a couple of years ago. But in it, like Teachable started marketing courses, their customers' courses to their customers' customers. And in a funny way, created this like weird tension where now their customers with their like SEM dollars or social marketing dollars were competing against the platform that they were on.
Yep.
And this is like another example where like the idea was great. It was really targeting the universal customer need of more revenue, but it created a really weird conflict of interest. And it's yeah, all the organizational challenges, the peanut buttering of efforts, like that's one category, but this type of like almost like a value conflict is another consideration for sure.
Someone's got to be looking at the whole system. It could be the CEO, but sometimes the CEO is so caught up in the board pressures of growth that they can lose sight of it, not because they're bad, but just because they're human. Um, and if it's not going to be the CEO, it often lands on the chief product officer if you have one. But
Yep.
someone really does need to look at the entire system and say, does it work together? But if we go
Absolutely.
back to your work step story, that you shared in your newsletter that maybe the people here a lot better, but the people watching haven't actually read. But what's funny about the story you shared is actually there was a diversification effort. I just talked about a diversification effort that didn't work.
Yep.
I mean, it wasn't awful, but I realized it was going to create problems for the business and it needed to be shut down. I have a really fun one from Meetup as well, that's all tied to the dynamic with WeWork as our parent company until they were no longer the parent company, but we probably don't have time for that, at least in this one. But on the work step example, because I know the story, here was an example where diversification actually paid off. And
Yeah.
so, well, why don't you just like take a moment to talk about how it paid off? And then I think the interesting thing is, well, how do you know which one? Like, when is
Yep.
it a good idea? When is it a bad idea? What do you do with this?
Wait, are you telling me, Gift, that you don't have a patented answer to the classic, well, how do you know if you have product market fit? That people always ask it like this knowing smirk from every product leader, expecting somebody to come out with the, guess what? I have the skeleton key. The truth is you don't know.
The perfect
And I
framework.
think and I think the even though I speak pretty loudly for like simplification and streamlining and killing all the extra and focusing on what's working, I'm actually a huge advocate for extreme expansion in the early stage.
Mm,
So to me, like I mean, again, overgeneralizing up the wazoo, but a good company journey is almost like a like a series of double, just like it's like layering S curves on top of each other. From
diverge,
an,
converge, huh?
yeah, from another angle, it is kind of, you know, double diamonds where like to me, the work step journey is they did exactly what they should have in the early stage. Their core product was working, but not working in like a somebody slapping you in the face saying you have product market fit. And they built something that was supposed to be just a support mechanism for the core product. And then their customers told them that's really valuable. And so they kind of like it was a diversification effort. But again, we get back to like why the key strategic question is when they
Mm,
did it when it was still time to just like explore because they hadn't found their home yet. And it just so happens that the original product that didn't ultimately have wings had gotten to be big enough where it's like, you know, you could kind of make the argument of like, uh-oh, like that should be the core product already.
mm.
But I'm very happy and I'm super proud of the work that we did to then kind of excavate the value out of the secondary product that is now their number one product and growing with a bullet.
So if I heard you correctly, let me parrot this back and see if uh, I'm understanding that even though they had a product that was, getting to a reasonable scale. This wasn't a ground floor startup anymore. This was,
No.
there was a real business here. Uh, it wasn't on fire. And so to a certain extent, it wasn't a terrible thing that they stayed in search mode, to kind
Yeah.
of use a little, Steve Blank language of a startup, however big it is,
Yeah.
is a temporary organization in search of a scalable, repeatable business model, right?
Yeah.
And so they had scaled to a certain point, but was it as scalable and repeatable as they wanted? So being in a bit of search mode wasn't a terrible thing. And then when they found something that they actually thought would catch fire, then they had to decide, do I kill the original darling? Do we do both? Should we do both? That kind of stuff.
Yeah, and it's here we get back to like kind of your whole like context matters and decisions are never like cut and dry.
Mhm.
What Workstep ended up doing was not killing the original product, but just like setting it up in a way where it was run with a relatively small skeleton crew, and strategically all efforts, all growth targeting efforts were targeted towards the product with real scalable semi-infinite upside, which is like, again, if you like overplay the theses of like you got to kill every, like you could have killed the original product, but why would you? Because it's
Mhm.
like, just because it's not scalable
Yep.
doesn't make it a bad business.
Yep.
You just have to know, have the wherewithal of kind of corp design of like, how can you then have your cake and eat it too? Um, and you need to like firewall those businesses very clearly and separately.
Yeah. It does get so nuanced as to, do you spin it off? Do you keep it? Do you kill it? Right? Is it synergistic? Is it helping build the value of the overall firm? Is it potentially going to poison the value of the firm? Does it have kind of gross margins that might drag down the business and the new
Yeah.
ones, better, where it actually sort of acts like a bad apple poisoning the
Yeah.
full barrel? So many things that go into a decision like that.
Even like, how do you do the accounting? Like, do you keep
Yep.
them in the same P&L? Because
Yep.
then, especially in the Workstep case where the product that was being kind of like put in maintenance mode was dramatically bigger than the original product, it might make it look like the company's scaling really slowly, even though the actual focus of the company is scaling really rapidly. And then, of course, we didn't even touch upon kind of the board component.
Yeah.
You have to have an incredibly good board, and Workstep was lucky to have one of the best early stage boards that I've seen, um, to really understand the play. Because some boards might then be like every quarter be like, well, what about this the first product? Like, we should just do something with that,
Yep.
and then muddy the waters. Because again, the firewalling only works if the firewalls are respected.
Right. Let me, so we're probably a little over on time, uh, but let me ask you a question to end us in something tactical, for anyone watching, all two of you who are watching, to take away from,
Hi, mom.
which is like, I've been in the situation where you've got some old revenue, it's important, it keeps the lights on, you want to keep it, but you've got some new thing that you actually need to build up and chase. And that's where the excitement is. That's where people want to work. Folks that feel like they're put on the old product feel like they've been punished. And yet they're doing really important work because they're paying everyone's salaries. That is probably where the bulk of the money is coming into the firm because the other thing still has, legs to grow. How have you how have you motivated, assigned, how have you practically, as a leader, as a, whether you're a CEO, CPO, whatever, but how have you practically, gotten a team like that that's on the old stuff, the non-sexy stuff, but important stuff, to function effectively, and do a great job?
That is a hard one because you're right. It's so easy to, because you also want to motivate the people doing the new thing because they're like, oh my God, this is like the thing. We're gonna like ride this to the moon. But then that implicitly means like y'all that are taking care of the old stuff, like, oh, nobody cares about you. And it's so hard to strike that balance. It's just like trying to be as open and vivid with your storytelling on like, this is how the company is, like this is paying the bills, so it is incredibly important, but this is driving future value, so it's incredibly important. Guess what? Both are incredibly important. And at the same time, be fairly keenly aware of different individuals' motivations.
Yeah.
Because I've worked with a lot of people who are super happy on kind of maintenance mode. the old thing. Maybe they bit their old hat with the company, so they have a sense of pride on the old thing, or that's just the way they're motivated. And then there's the people who never want to work on anything except like the latest, greatest, snazziest thing. So bad things happen when the wrong profile is on the wrong thing.
I agree with that. I think you choose who works on what wisely. Uh, what I did, one of the things that really helped when I had to do this at Meetup was I think people get a sense of importance by watching where executives spend their time.
Hmm.
And I made sure that I, as the chief product officer, as sort of the executive, that I was giving them a lot of time. They saw that I was giving them a lot of time. Other people saw that I was giving them a lot of time. I didn't get up and give a public talk about anything without mentioning them. I
Hmm.
was celebrating their wins in public. I poured love on this team. A huge amount of my time was on the really messy, new stuff that was complicated and did need a lot of my attention. But I really tried to pour public love, as well as like my own personal time with them on this team, and it did make them feel relevant. It really helped. So that's my tip to leaders is like watch where you're spending your time because people, regardless of what you say, people will cue off of that.
That's a really good tip because, yeah, actions do speak well louder than words, and people do pay attention.
Yeah. Well, anything you want to add to wrap us up?
A whole ton, but that would probably take us on another rabbit hole. So let's do this again next week and see where we go that time.
All right.
I have promised myself that we need to have a conversation about founder mode.
Yeah,
So
I think
Zeitgeist
that's
might
right.
have moved on. Nobody remembers the whole thing anymore next week, but we're still going to do it, damn it.
There's also a really interesting conversation around hiring and how companies hire leaders where they want someone that's going to take them through that's seeing the next movie they're going to see, even though they're not actually through the movie they're in right now. And
Yeah.
so they often hire the wrong leader for what they are now because of where they hope to be. Anyway, there's a lot of interesting spin-off topics here, but we'll wrap our experiment. Here's the end of experiment one, and looking forward to experiment two.
Cool.